Hi there, my name is Jessica Drossin, and I am going to walk you through this edit that I did the other day with Elise and some leaf overlays. And I want to make this edit pretty fast, pretty streamlined. So I'm just going to walk you through what I did with the cloning rather than reclone everything. This was the straight out of camera image, and as you can see, there is there's just these weeds here. There's some details here that I didn't like. This sort of pole I find distracting. The biggest problem for me was I didn't like how my eye was being led right off the page here to this bright area. So what I decided to do was I just, using my lasso tool, I literally just sort of softly uh, grabbed areas here from this leaf like a little triangle, and then I merely flopped it and mirrored it over on this side. So what I wanted to do is create a triangular composition where the bright spot was the center rather than here off to, this side that where nothing's going on. So that being said, here it is once I had done this cloning work. So you can kind of see here this branch. If you look closely, it's the same branch over here. It's just been enlarged and flopped and mirrored. Um, and this that pole area is gone. This weird, I don't even know what it is. That this is gone. But you can see here before I've added vignettes, etc. You can kind of tell this looks a little fake. But I wasn't really worried about that because of what we're going to be doing here in in the rest of the processing. So let's just walk you through where I started here. Oh, and just one more thing. I also just I wanted to have a little more separation. So what I did was I sampled a color, like maybe this color, and I got a new layer. And I think I just maybe lightly painted right on top of some of those leaf details, just so that it wasn't too busy behind her. Because let me go back to the original. In the original, you can see she separates, but I wanted it to be more of a yellow, so I painted on some yellow, and then I believe that I did some of this by putting it into the color mode, where I changed the green to more of a golden color, and then I probably also went ahead and used uh, a variation of either soft light or screen mode to also just sort of soften that area behind her so that she really pops out. Alrighty. So the next thing that I did when it came to adding the actions, because I didn't want it to get much brighter than this, I liked the overall sort of tone. So I went with the overexposed. Now this isn't really overexposed, but I want it to stay darker. I don't want it to get a whole lot brighter. So I picked this one. I'm going to hit the play button here. And this is from JD QuickFlow. Give it just a second here. It's going to create a folder, and I'm going to open up this folder. And as you can see, it's adding a little more vibrancy and brightness and tone to my yellows as already. I'm going to start down here where it says full body retouch and sharpen. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and you can see this is sharpening up my image. I'm going to open this, and in this black area here, the mask, it says full body skin softens. So I'm going to go ahead and with a little bit of white, I am going to just soften up some of these skin details. do apologize if you hear babies or dogs barking. That's just my life. Kids and dogs being loud while I'm recording. Just anyway. Okay. So I'm just sort of softly, I've got about a 45% opacity here. I'm just softly going over these little areas and doing a little retouching. Obviously she's very, it's beautiful and it doesn't need to do a whole lot of retouching. I'm going to also just retouch here just a little bit in her dress where I've got some folds here that I don't necessarily want to have because I'm terrible about ironing. So I'm just going to sort of iron out the folds with my retouch tool. And here we go. Let's see here. All right. So I'm going to just shut that back up. So this was our retouch. And then I'm going to go to the pink cheeks and very subtly, about 16%, I'll make my brush even a little smaller. I'm going to just give her a little bit of more of a reddish tone here on the edges of her hair because she is a redhead, and I'm just going to play that up a little bit, and also in her cheeks and a little bit in her lips. I do not do I don't do hair and makeup before shoots. Oops, sorry. And so I just kind of tend to do a little bit of retouch and adding a little bit of color sometimes in post. Alrighty. I just add a little more here to her hair. And so it's a subtle thing. And if there's any areas where I want to reduce some of the red, which I do a little bit on her neck, there's a little bit of redness, and on her fingers I'm going to go in and paint with this reduce red. And I just make sure my brush is appropriately sized. Can you see it's roughly the size, the diameter of her fingers right here, so I can just go in and I'm not being real picky. I'm just softly going in with a relatively low opacity at 25% and going over these areas where I'm seeing they seem a little too reddish to me. Okay, before, after, we'll just tone that red down. And I'm going to just blur that a little bit right in the mask. Set it to about, let's see here, sorry. And then I'm going to go ahead and these are basically instant overlays that are built into the QuickFlow set. And I'm going to go ahead and turn them on. Here, I'm going to zoom out so you can get a little better idea of what's going on here. So this is before, and this is after, and I really liked how it's sort of drawing my eye away from the bottom towards the top of the image where I like all this leaf detail, and her face is over here. So I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to, I think that's a little too warm, so I'm going to look here now on the black and white overlay. I like this as well, and I'm going to go ahead and also look at the center overlay with black and white. So the only one I'm not going to use is the warm center one. So here it was, here it is, with the overlays that are built into QuickFlow. And let me see what happens if I add a little warmth. No, I'm not going to do that. All right, now this is called Paint and Highlight, so I'm just make sure that I have a white brush, and I'm going to bring my opacity down here to about 6%, and I am just going to very softly paint in to where I want little things to be a little bit brighter. So thinking kind of like almost like a non-destructive form of dodging here. So I'm just going to brighten up her face here, brighten up maybe these areas right around the edges of her hair. You can see it's kind of starting to glow a little bit. Just do that even a little bit more. Bring it up into the tree behind her. And I'm just, again, just sort of following where the natural highlights are hitting, and I'm just accentuating them just a little bit here with this paint and highlights tool. Not doing anything fancy, keeping it a very low opacity, but just going over and enhancing areas that are already in the highlights. Okay, so let's see what this is looking like. Okay, you see that? It's sort of subtle, but it's definitely there. And I'm going to just blur it a little bit, again with my Gaussian blur right in that mask. And I'm going to paint in some shadows now, just to give her a little more depth. Just again following where the shadows are hitting in my image. I'm going to go even right here on her eyebrow. And in the shadows of her hair. Just basically a non-destructive form of burning now. Okay. So this was done in the QuickFlow. All right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play with some of the tones. So I'm going to go here to Audition All Tints. And I am just going to try some out and see what they look like. So what I love about Allspice up here is I love how it's adding this glow into this area, but overall it's too bright for me. So I'm going to turn it back off. There's Bay Leaf. Now usually Bay Leaf's one of my go-tos, but it's too dark and blue for this image for me. I like the green, so I just kind of keep circling here. This is caraway seed, celery seed. I like that. I like how that green sort of glows. I just keep coming down. Cumin, ground cumin is a little bit more brownish. Mustard seed. Parsley and sage is the one that I ended up settling on along with rum raisin. So just so you can see, this was sugar and spice, and this is peach and aloe. But so what I ended up doing on the edit that you've all seen was I selected rum raisin because I liked sort of these purplish shadows that were going on here, but I didn't like it on her because I felt like it was adding too much redness to her dress and to her skin tone. So I went into the mask here with a black brush and I simply painted out that tone in her dress. And I think my favorite way to do things is just with a soft brush at relatively low opacity and just go over it. Don't spend a lot of time doing really fancy masks. Just do it nice and soft and painterly. Alrighty. So let's see what this is looking like. I think I'm going to leave a little bit of that reddish tone in her hair. Okay. Now here's parsley and sage. Now this is it's directly on top of rum raisin. And I just loved what happened with the tones there. But I was still thinking, remembering how allspice had sort of lit up the top of it. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to add allspice, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill this with black. so you can't see it. Now I'm just going to paint in so I'm only having selective areas that you're seeing of allspice. So I'm going to bring it down to about 30%, and I'm just going to start painting in here again to some of these tones where I want it to be a little more glowy and a little bit warmer and brighter. Okay. I'm putting a tiny bit in her face. Just, handling it in a very painterly way. And I'm going to blur within my mask just to give make sure that my transitions are all very soft. I don't want to see any hard lines in my tones. Alrighty. So I'm liking this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of all of the layers that I didn't use. And now I'm just going to go through and show you how I added the leaf overlay. I was really liking how this was looking. I felt pretty good that the area down here that I was concerned about was sort of, fading into the darkness, so you didn't notice it so much. But I thought, I wonder what this looked like. I saw all these really pretty leaves and this sort of magical bokeh, and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I added a leaf overlay. So I found this leaf overlay combination 1, and I had selected it all and copied it, and then I just popped it right onto this image. And I didn't feel like this was right. I felt like there was too much stuff going on, but I absolutely loved how these gold tones from those leaves in the mini pack, I think it's combination 1 in the mini pack, how they worked with these yellow tones here in the bokeh. I always say it wrong. Please forgive me if I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I just can't help myself. And I loved how it echoed the same colors in her skirt. So what I decided to do was I decided to sort of take this apart, and I started, and modify it. So I went in and I was grabbing, parts of this and moving things around and making things smaller and sort of organizing stuff where I wanted it to go. So let's say I wanted to get rid of this, I would just, get rid of it, or maybe I would get rid of it, but then add it down here and flop it. And I played with this for a little while till I was really happy with how it was looking. And just, again, I want to sort of spare you, me playing and figuring it out. And this is how it ended up looking. So I'm going to just hit Command All and copy. And I'm just going to paste it right on in there. Whoops, didn't do that right. Sorry. Sometimes I get a little crazy cray. So I'm going to hit Command All, copy, and this time I'm really going to do the right thing and paste in the modified version here of leaf combination 1. And I just preferred it low. I liked sort of the green on top. I liked to keep my triangular composition reinforced there, and just let it sort of settle in here towards the bottom. In fact, I need to move it down just a smidgen. But that was just basically me rearranging leaves from this into a format that I felt was working for this particular image in this pose. And it saved me a lot of time to sort of work with something that was already there. Now, I feel like it's easier to sort of sometimes start with something rather than just going from scratch and independently grabbing one leaf overlay after the next. So that's what I did. Anyway, at this point, let me again go ahead and just get rid of any of the layers that we're not using. At this point, I think all I was really doing was just going in there and making sure that I had things. A lot of times I look at my layers and I tend to have not a lot of brightness, and so I will go through and just make little modifications to my overall contrast and make sure that I'm not making things too dark, and then looking into as well, do I need to add more saturation or take saturation away? And sometimes I will just go ahead and paint it back in to just a few little areas. In this case, maybe I'll just paint a little more saturation into her hair. I think the last thing that I want to do is I'm just going to sample a little bit of this color. And just, whoops, I don't want that. I want to paint in. I'm going to paint in just to a few of these little leaves just to unify a few more of these tones. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just sort of playing up some of these brown leaves here. But hopefully you can kind of see how I did this and how I use the QuickFlow actions and their tints, and then sort of repurposed the leaf overlay from the mini pack just to sort of fit a new need that I had. All right, well, thanks so much for watching.